of focus on. Elsewhere, I'm looking at General Motors as well. Shares there down 1.7% at the close. We had seen Bernstein cut the recommendation on the automaker market from outperform. I'll get there in the end, saying the data suggests could be rising earnings.
For all of us.
We're all mundane. We're mundane hard
today. It's
like
10 o'clock where he's from right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I've been awake for about 3 days. We'll figure it out eventually. We had that news over the weekend as well about GM starting to temporary layoff of 2/3 of the workers, the Fairfax factory in Kansas as well. That's as they begin production of the new Chevrolet Bolt model. So that's one other share that we've been looking at too. And American Airlines, which was down a little bit earlier, but just towards the close has managed to rally slightly, finishing down 0.3% as well. We've been talking about the Boeing news around the union deal there, and actually American Airlines one of the transport unions there looking for contract approval for a contract extension, which would be double-digit raises for workers at American Airlines. This would be fleet service workers, ground mechanics and other personnel. Remember, American Airlines did deal with flight attendants just a couple of weeks ago, getting raises of as much as 20% at a cost of $4.2 billion. So that's in focus there as well. American Airlines down 0.3% at the close.
And of course, we're watching Boeing and how conversations are going on there. All right, guys, quick mention here. S&P closes a record, 40th record high this year. Let's say it again. 40th record high this year.
Stunning.
Absolutely no news.
It's just for me.
It's just for you. Yeah. I was actually looking. I was like, when was the FTSE's last record high? Because it feels like this is not something that you would talk about every day, Stephen Carroll.
I mean, the thing is that I'm practically gone to bed by the time the FTSE closes. But yeah, look, the FTSE was not having a great year. It has had a better few months now since the election. But yeah, it's true that we're a bit far away from this 40 records.
Yeah, just a little bit. All right, we were looking at the bond market there. It's just worth touching on really quickly. Not a lot happened, but that curve continues to steepen, guys. It was really about the front end. Now maybe it's about the back end selling off a little bit, and we get $183 billion worth of supply coming on over the next 3 days. So that'll be interesting to see the takedown, but that's gone pretty well so far.
I can't believe the 40th record in the S&P. Sorry, that just seems like a lot. Wow. All right, so let's get to something that we've all probably been measured at some point for our BMI, our body mass index, which is a relationship of our height and weight, and it's often used to say, are we healthy? Do we have a healthy weight? Are we overweight? Are we obese? Kind of put us into a clarification, if you will, or classification. Well, the Wall Street with the story, doctors looking at it and apparently saying that it's flawed. They say it doesn't distinguish between a couple of different types of fat, and it doesn't identify where the fat is located. And Stephen, all of this is really important to really figure out if you're going to have health problems going forward.
But also, it's key to whether or not you get access to GLP-1 drugs as well. So this is something that's a very market-moving story as well. I mean, BMI originated in the 1800s. So, I mean, you could do with an update, I'd say, it'd be fair to say as well. And look, many doctors have been out there talking about how there are better measurements that you can use. Things like, you know, a ratio of waist to hip circumference is one way that could be used as an alternative as well. There's better calculations for metabolic health as well. Essentially, this was designed with a European man in mind. So as a result, it is very much out of date when looking at a global world.
When you start in the 1800s, right? It's almost like some measurement.
Wait, but if we go by this, does that mean that America's like more overweight or less underweight?
Well, they'd have to decide how they're going to measure by it instead, and I think that'll be the question for next.
Well, I think it's interesting also because you have the testimonials that you're hearing from the GLP drug maker here. And I think what's interesting about this also, this is kind of wonky, but if you think about what's going on in the drug industry, you have to think about how to pay for it, what the costs are, and what the insurance looks like. And this all comes with the overlay of that FTC crackdown on pharmacy benefit managers. Now, they're looking at insulin, but of course, you have to wonder how the rollover applies to GLP-1 over time. And I do think that the definitions ultimately play in at the end of the day, doesn't it?
You stunned us to silence because that was so smart for 406. Let's go to the other chat, shall we?
Okay, yeah, we shall.
This is Shanae's favorite, and she's the guest host, so let's do that to her right now. So apparently, the old Goldman Sachs building down on Wall Street was converted into apartments, and you can get one for like $4,000. And I find this so interesting because there was, I think, in like a clock tower somewhere in Brooklyn. I desperately wanted to live there, but it was 3 bedrooms and no windows. And my husband's like, you cannot buy an apartment with no windows.
Well, he's right. First of all.
Yes, he was right. Just don't tell him I said that.
You would be so depressed. But also, you really have to go to lengths to refurbish these buildings, don't you guys?
Yeah, it can be really tough, right? We talk about this all the time, right? What you have to do for office buildings. Although I'm looking at pictures and I'm like, sign me up because it looks
good.
Well,
and is there
come on.
nostalgia value?
You put a pool on the top of a building and like you're golden.
Also,
like number one.
South Street Seaport is getting very cool. There's like a concert venue down there. So the whole area is being refurbished, let alone finally apartments. $4,000 a month in New York these days.
Well, unless it's like a studio. But you know what's interesting? I think it's like the width of the building. So the fatter your building is, the harder it is to convert because then you're like left with all this dead space. But if it's a skinnier building where some of those old buildings down there are, perfect for conversion.
like, what do you do with the trading floor, right? Like, you know, we talk about open concept, love it, but that's really open concept.
That's your gym. And your, you know, lounge concierge baby stroller thingamajig.
Silence.
Sounds like you are interested. Sounds like you are interested. All right, guys, that is a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, we call it the closing bell. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
All right, coming up, you got senators preparing to grill Novo Nordisk on how it goes about pricing its GLP-1 drugs. We're going to look into what should happen as the government puts price cap on the medications. Also, Novo Nordisk wants to tell the government. This is The Close on Bloomberg.
Is the Vivian Tom clientele?
Yeah, power women, like the dragon women. They're lawyers, they're CEOs, they're all important decision makers, women in the world.
Why do you position your products for this group of women?
When I started, designing, I always want to do something that is empower women.
When you take a look at your store, there is something for everyone. Take a look at the T-shirt, for example.
My customer growing, like 30 years already, so they become more powerful. I also want to grow my Gen Z audience too, they are like in the 20s, so it's a more affordable price for them. And then, my powerful woman's daughter wearing their mom's dresses, and they feel that the power, the energy. So now they come back to the store and they buy more.
David Weston. Join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week, telling stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. Each week, we'll go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
Above all else, it's a mission.
It's done nothing but grow immensely. To me, that's an extraordinary sign.
We can be the change that we want to see.
Watch the all-new Wall Street Week. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Welcome back to The Close. I'm Alex Steele.
And I'm Shonali Bassick.
All right, let's take a look at some of the biggest movers because what 40th record high for the S&P?
It was incredible to watch, even though not that much happened.
Right, that's the crazy part.
We are higher, even though, what's funny about this, yields from the beginning of last week have not changed that much.
Right.
So it's hard to blame this on interest rates.
Right, but the curve is a little bit steeper as well, and all the like. Individually, there were some individual stocks we don't want to focus on here, and Intel is one of them. That stock ending higher on the day. Of course, that news that maybe Apollo will be investing a few $1 billion into the company, but as Stacey Ragston said over at Bernstein, don't take private equity money unless you absolutely have to. The other stock I want to hit on here, and I appreciate this is an ADR, but go with me on this, is Kering. So Kering and LVMH were downgraded to neutral over Bank of America amid worries over a prolonged slowdown in the luxury goods sector, and we all know how much that has to do with China. China PBOC cut rates yesterday. They're going to make an announcement with something tomorrow. The hope is that there'll be a lot of stimulus coming from China that will help the consumer, but we heard the same thing from Mercedes, for example. They're really struggling as well, those luxury players getting hit. All right, our top story this hour are GLP-1s and the pricing backlash. Novo Nordisk CEO is heading to Capitol Hill tomorrow to face a hearing led by Senator Bernie Sanders. The company is facing pressure to make make its drug more affordable. Sanders says the drug could be profitably produced for less than $100 a month. That's almost $1,000 less than its list price. Novo says it's the middlemen that are the problem, and this is just the latest headwind for Novo as competition ramps up with new weight loss shots as well as pills. And Novo Nordisk has been raking in more than $50 billion from selling popular GLP-1 drugs Ozempic and Wegovy. And now they want to spread the wealth. Bernie Sanders, of course, leading that move. All right, let's get more on this with Madison. There we go. Come on, prompter. Madison Muller. I was so close. I knew it was an M&M. Bloomberg News healthcare reporter. Madison, we know now what the CEO is going to say. What did we learn?
So we learned in the written testimony. We still don't really know exactly what he's going to say from this long, lengthy written testimony that we saw this afternoon. But what we know is that he is going to blame the middlemen, which is sort of the U.S. pharma CEO playbook. You know, we've heard this before from him. It's a similar argument. You know, blaming the U.S. healthcare system.
It's just incredible because now you have pharmacy benefit managers. You can count among their enemies the FTC, Mark Cuban, and also now the CEO of Novo Nordisk. He's kind of finding common enemies, isn't he?
Yeah. It's definitely the hot topic right now, and the blame is coming down on PBMs. This is something that U.S. pharma CEOs and pharma companies have been talking about for a while, and now obviously others are taking note as well and sort of joining in. But there are, you know, lots of arguments to be made in terms of Novo is going to talk about the billions of dollars that they've put into developing these drugs, the research and development and production costs, and the fact that Novo's been at this for 3 decades. These are all things that are going to come up tomorrow. But as my colleague Robert Langreth reported this morning, looking at the R&D costs, Novo's already recouped 3 decades or 2 decades of R&D costs from the sales of Ozempic and Wegovy, which is just extremely fast. These drugs are extremely profitable, so it sort of undermines that argument a little bit.
The more they wind up having the drugs approved for other stuff, like heart issues or diabetes or other things, just not just weight loss, for example, does that change any of this calculus?
I mean, Novo will argue that these drugs, can be used for so much potentially, that they're so valuable, and that value sort of needs to be taken into account when we're talking about the price of these drugs. Is obviously the value that they have to the U.S. healthcare system and the value of the drugs themselves in treating potentially multiple different related and unrelated illnesses. And so that's something that they will talk about.
It's interesting. This is a company that's not based in the United States, but of course has a massive impact on American consumers as well. Can you explain a little more about how this really stacks up against American competitors and whether this kind of ties into the national discourse on what's made here and what's made abroad?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because really, as we've talked about, their main competitor is a U.S. pharmaceutical company, Eli Lilly, and they are the two in this market right now. And so there are lots of other companies that are trying to make weight loss drugs because we've seen how enormously popular and profitable they are. But right now, when it comes to competition, it's really, an American company, Eli Lilly, versus a Danish company. And interestingly, a huge portion of Novo's sales are here in the U.S. The U.S. is such an incredibly important market for them. They also invest a lot in production in the U.S., so a lot of their drugs and their supply chain is here in the U.S., which is interesting too. And so it's just, it's an interesting dynamic to look at that.
Jobs versus profit. We're going to dig into this more. Bloomberg's Madison Muller, thank you very much for your time. Good luck covering all of this tomorrow. We're going to get more insight on the broader pharma sector from Jared Holtz, Managing Director at Mizuho. You look at how much the GLP-1 conversation has stolen the room in the world of pharma. Is there anything else you're covering, frankly, right now?
This has been by far the most topical arena within pharma and really all of healthcare for 2+ years now. I don't really think there's anything close, just given the market size, the population, the fact that at the end of the day, this is a consumer product just as it is a therapeutic. So I'd say probably nothing close to this within the entire sector.
There's so much promise with these drugs. At the end of the day, you look at concerns already coming up within the government about what they cost. How much of a risk here does that concern really create?
I'm not really concerned about pricing as a risk near term. I think anytime you have a market like this that's under so much intensity from a competitive standpoint, and we're already looking at Novo Nordisk's drug facing pricing pressure as a result of the IRA in 2027. So I think these are things that are going to creep up. Not that concerned about tomorrow necessarily as far as what the government is going to say. I think the investment base knows most of these risks. But yeah, I mean, long term, I think pricing and competition are always things we kind of look at.
I take a look at a year normalized chart of Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, and Eli Lilly has been really making a nice run here and been outperforming since July. Is Novo losing that first mover advantage thing?
I don't really think so. I think some of it is probably just the investor base that's willing to put money into either of these stocks, and looking at near-term catalysts and the extent of earnings beats and things like that. I think they're both. It's kind of 1A and 1B to me in healthcare. Like these are the most looked at names, I believe, that we kind of consider within healthcare on a day-to-day basis. I'm not really sure why there's been such a lag over the last 6 months. Over the last couple of weeks, there have been some pipeline issues at Novo Nordisk and other situations, but they've both been excellent.
What other companies are kind of getting up to speed on GLP-1s that we need to start looking in that comp chart?
So Amgen's probably third or potentially third. They've got a big catalyst coming here by year end. They're looking at about a dozen different arms of their weight loss drug to see which doses and over which duration give patients the best efficacy, and obviously safety and tolerability are very important. But I think as we look forward here over the next 3 to 6 months, Amgen could wind up emerging as the third obesity player. There's also Viking Therapeutics, Structure in biotech, and then Pfizer's working on an oral as well that they're kind of investigating the doses that they're going to use.
I think I'm interested in asking about Pfizer as well, because Pfizer is such a giant in the room of pharma, and what they haven't built, they bought. And so how much do they need it? Do you think that these large pharma companies that see the potential of GLP-1 elsewhere catch up because they really need to at this juncture?
I think they all kind of need it. I mean, this will be the biggest market in all of pharma and or biotech within the next 2 years, and it will undeniably be $100 billion by the end of the decade, even with a lot of price concessions or pricing pressure on the group, just given the population and the cost of the drug. So I believe Pfizer does need it. They're working on it behind the scenes. They're looking at a range of doses for an oral therapy. Right now, all we have are injectables, but Roche is also kind of in the arena. I'd be surprised if other pharmas didn't get in here vis-a-vis M&A at some point.
I want to go back a little bit and talk about kind of this argument that the Novo Nordisk CEO is making to Congress here. This idea that you should just blame the middlemen, blame the pharmacy benefit managers. I've been trying to untangle this in my head for a long time.
It's a congressional hearing, man. Why bother?
Well, but this pharmacy benefit manager chain of rebates and getting the item to customers is very confusing in terms of how the economics work across all drugs, really. And at the end of the day, what does it mean if that system were to be disrupted for a company like Novo Nordisk or Lilly?
Well, I think the same argument that is going to be used tomorrow is the same argument that pharma has been using for decades, which is to say that the supply chain or the middlemen that are associated with these transactions getting drugs to patients are why the price is so high, because there's so many other parties that take profit along the way. So I don't think anything that's going to be said tomorrow is going to come across as novel. And I think the Senate and other members of Congress have been hearing this for years as well. That's why there's pressure on those type of businesses. But I don't think anything tomorrow is unique to these weight loss drugs. I think it's unique insofar as the population and the size of the market in the out years is just tremendous.
All right, Jared, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jared Holtz over at Mizuho, joining us on what's going to happen on Capitol Hill tomorrow with Novo Nordisk and Bernie Sanders, basically. All right, coming up, top three, where we focus in on the top three movers and shakers, the center of the day's biggest stories. That's next. This is The Close on Bloomberg.
the countdown to the market open as we bring you the first trades across Europe.
We'll debate the most important stories and what will drive the big investment decisions throughout the morning. I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Kriti Gupta.
And I'm Anna Edwards. Join us every weekday morning for the opening trade, live at 7 a.m. here in London.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at the Federal Reserve, and this is Bloomberg.
There is this real momentum from Wall Street.
We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
We thought we'd take a look at Bitcoin versus the S&P 500.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto, the people.
A tectonic shift emanating from Washington.
It's really a tale of two cities in crypto.
Crypto shouldn't be partisan.
The transactions.
Really a record-breaking moment.
Crypto VC is back.
And the technology.
It's really the beginning of a global on-chain economy.
And if America doesn't embrace it, we're going to be left behind.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays, only on Bloomberg.
Time now for the top three, where we name drop the people driving some of the day's most talked about stories. First up, Gina Raimondo, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. She is behind the new Biden administration proposal that would block the sale of an import of Chinese and Russian-made hardware and software for connected vehicles. The goal of the ban would be to bolster U.S. security from hacking threats. And Shonali, it doesn't just stop here. It actually goes to other places, too. I was in a meeting earlier talking about how AI is going to become really localized and regionalized, and making sure that the data is not going to be shared with other countries or even other states, for example, and how this is just the way that we're going here with technology.
National security in the vein of commerce is really the name of the game. Gina Raimondo, by the way, is a consistently floated member of a future cabinet if Harris were to win, maybe even Treasury Secretary. I mean, she is a name to absolutely watch, and her way of handling kind of these key election concerns, I think, is going to put her increasingly on the map for the next couple of months.
Yeah, talk about handling difficult situations. What are you watching?
Yes, actually, another very difficult situation. I'm watching Andrea Orchel, who is the CEO of UniCredit. The lender has moved to more than double its stake in Commerzbank and has become its largest shareholder ahead of the German government. And it's signaling that UniCredit is on the course for a takeover. Remember, this is something that the German government does not really want, to say the least. And they have been working with Andrea Orchel. Remember, this was the top deal maker at UBS that went to try to go lead Santander and then got into a big legal dispute, not shy of legal disputes to get the tough job done. He's been working with Barclays and Bank of America to quietly build up that Commerzbank stake, according to Bloomberg's reporting.
Here's what I don't understand. So they have 9%. They're petitioning to get over 12%, right? Because you can't own more than a certain amount. Like, the fact that he wouldn't have talked to someone in the government astounds me, particularly if it's like making some kind of an official takeover talk. Like, really? Did they not talk to a government?
If I know anything about Andrea, he's probably lawyered up well on this if he didn't have those discussions. So, you know, Art of War was the first thing he ever taught me. So there,
exactly. So there you go.
Him.
But I remember the idea of like, oh, it's going to be more Italian than German. I don't really know what that means, but there we go. All right, third up, I'm watching Asia Wilson after the Las Vegas Aces player was named the 2024 WNBA MVP, becoming the second player ever to win the award unanimously. Honorable mention of the night is Indiana Fever's Caitlin Clark, who was named AP's Rookie of the Year also unanimously. But let's be honest, this is all about women crushing it right now in sports.
Absolutely, and basketball has been a really exciting arena for that. I would put women's football or soccer, rather, to be part of that group. But these two women have stolen the show in such a massive way, and money comes along with it. Not only investment in the sports, but investment in sponsorship. So a lot more to go as they win these awards.
Right, but isn't their whole like their likeness image has been really like, oh, it's supposed to be really good for players, but then maybe it's not, and they're not being handled well, or she's laughing at me.
I love talking to you about NIL.
Because you're like, oh, finally, I can know more.
Well, more to come on that.
NIL.
NIL, name, image, likeness.
Okay.
That's what gets you into college sports in a bigger way with all that big money. Now, we're going to switch gears from NIL and Alex and her sports foray. We're going to talk about the AI race. It's continuing to heat up across the globe. We're going to break down what it means for America's infrastructure to make sure the U.S. stays #1.
Oh, I got this. I got this one.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers jobs day like Bloomberg.
As we spend some time here on the broader presidential race.
Let's focus in on European politics.
Makes you wonder how politics might play out.
It's the world's second largest economy with a growing influence in global affairs. But geopolitical uncertainties, deflationary pressures, and questions about foreign investment linger. Bloomberg, the China Show, brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of breaking news, in-depth market analysis, and the most influential newsmakers in and around China. Bloomberg, the China Show. Weekdays at 9 a.m. Hong Kong time, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. Bloomberg loves earnings.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
AI is here to stay, and the country has to be successful in AI from a geopolitical securities perspective as well as an economic perspective. Number 2, the climate crisis, although we may change our focus over a period of time, is going to be something that we are going to have to deal with as humanity.
That was Constellation Energy CEO Joe Dominguez talking to Bloomberg's Katie Greifeld earlier about how AI is creating new needs for energy that our country hasn't experienced before. And that was a deal that was announced on Friday. We wrote the story of Microsoft investing about $1.6 billion with Constellation Energy to revamp their nuclear 3 Mile Island.
It's fascinating. I want to look at some of the stocks that are also associated with this that are not Constellation, which was flying on the heels of that announcement. Take a look at Vistra Energy since that announcement from Microsoft that it would use nuclear energy, as we've been talking about. Vistra has been up, I think, almost 16% on Friday, another 3% today. NRG was down, maybe competitive pressure on the heels of this, but up another 6% today. We're going to bring in the reporter who had helped really report this out on Friday and follow through with the Constellation CEO today. We're going to talk to Bloomberg's Will Wade to talk about the nuclear space, because you see it in the reaction. Look at that, 22% for Vistra over just 3 days. Clearly, the market is hoping for more nuclear energy, frankly, into the AI space. But of course, there are complications, to say the least. Can you walk through what the expectation is here?
The market would take more nuclear power today if they could build it, but it takes a long time to build it. But you should look at the year-to-date returns. Constellation's up more than 100%, and Vistra and Energy, they're all in like the top 10 of the S&P.
Vistra's the best performing stock on the S&P.
Incredible.
Constellation's the third.
Yeah.
Okay, to that point, what was interesting, though, is we can make a lot of hay about this deal. But in terms of the actual energy it's providing for a data center, how much is it actually versus how much, say, a Microsoft data center actually needs?
This reactor is not one of the biggest in the country. It's 837 megawatts. The new ones now are about 1.1 gigawatts, so quite a bit bigger. But it has the benefit of being something that you can turn on in a couple of years. The last time we built a brand new reactor, they were like years and years behind schedule and billions of dollars over budget. So being able to bring 3 Mile Island back online in just a couple of years is going to make a huge difference.
Where are the sources of capital going to come from? I think it's interesting to see Microsoft really have a partnership in this regard. How many more companies can do something like this? And do you expect other private capital providers as well to step up?
Well, the list of retired reactors that can come back online is really short. I did a story on that, and basically I found 3. And now there's 2 of them coming online. So NextEra owns the only other plant that could potentially be revived. And they told us a few months ago they've been getting a lot of inquiries, mainly from data centers who want the power as soon as they could possibly deliver it.
Do we think that all the data centers are going to actually be built based on the power ability we have in this country?
I think they're going to build as many data centers as they can find power for.
Right, so power is going to be the constraint.
It's one of the huge constraints, yeah. I mean, you have to find places to put them. These are big facilities, too.
Well, what does that mean in terms of other types of power sources that we may have to see these data centers, frankly, tap into? And really the push, I've heard as crazy as people looking to deregulate many parts of the grid to try to get us there. So, you know, what will it take at the end of the day to really get that power to these centers?
You know, I think one of the key issues is climate, because a few years ago we were hearing all about everyone with their climate goals, everyone wants to go green, and all of a sudden there's so much power demand that now the companies are saying we may have to push out our climate goals, and that's going to be an issue. We've done a couple of stories on how we were starting to see a transition away from gas, and now all of this new demand is going to keep gas plants in service longer. We're hearing about more new build for gas plants that we weren't hearing about before. I'm starting to hear people talk about delaying closure of coal plants that we thought were going to close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just talk to Germany about that. That's definitely in there. Hey, Will, really appreciate it. Bloomberg's Will Wade joining us there. All right, let's stay with data centers and power. And another company in the space is AES. Now, the company sells renewable power to corporate customers. It has 2 very fast-growing utilities and has signed power purchase agreements with big tech companies like Google. However, the stock is underperforming some of its peers like Vistra as well as Constellation Energy. Joining us is the CEO, Andres Gluski, CEO of AES. Andres, good to see you.
Nice to be here.
You're in the same business as like a Constellation Energy. You just have different sources of power. So why the underperformance right now with the stock?
Well, I think right now there's been a very strong reaction for nuclear. And what the market has really rewarded is what's called independent power producers who have excess capacity. So some of the nukes, the first rise of Constellation, for example, was just recontracting nuclear power at higher prices to the data centers. So that's it. Now, what I feel very confident is that most of the data centers will be powered by renewable energy. So if you look at what's actually in the interconnection queue today, 95% is renewable. Not even 1% is new nuclear. So that's why there was a lot of excitement about bringing these on. But to put it in context, if they brought back all 3 of the nuclear reactors, that's maybe 4 gigawatts. You know, the country is building about 30 gigawatts of renewables a year. So I think it's, you know, you have to put this in context, and I don't think the market's quite digested that.
So you need both, but really the bulk will eventually lie on renewables. So what does your backlog look like, and what are the conversations that you're having right now?
Well, we're building about 3.5 gigawatts a year. We're signing about 5. So we have a backlog of almost 13 gigawatts. That means signed contracts that I have to deliver over the next 3 years. So yeah, there's definitely any project that you can get permitted and built on time, there's demand for.
You know, recently you had struck a deal with CDPQ as well, big Canadian fund, and we were talking a little earlier about the amount of investment that is needed.
Strategy of partnering with people.